Welcome to Just Asia, AHRC TV's weekly human rights program. These are the headlines. Pakistan's top court grants week-long stay to mentally ill death row inmate. Death in Sri Lankan police station must be properly investigated. Constitution Day marked as Black Day by many in Nepal. British labor rights defender sentenced for defamation in Thailand. Indonesian Human Rights Court must be reformed to provide justice. Urgent appeals from Nepal and Indonesia. Welcome to AHRC TV's Just Asia. I am Julia Roblando. This week, Just Asia begins with Pakistan, where the Supreme Court ordered a week-long stay on the execution of mentally ill Imdad Ali. Despite a medical report that diagnosed him insane, Ali was to be hanged early on September 20th. Due to appeals by rights groups, the Supreme Court will now hear the case on September 27th and make its final decision regarding Ali's life. A former electrician, Imdad Ali was sentenced to death in 2002 over the shooting of a cleric. Last year, his sentence was upheld by the Lahore High Court. Imdad has been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and in 2013, a medical report stated him to be insane. Under Pakistan's prison rules, the state is obliged to provide treatment for Imdad's schizophrenia and to shift him to a mental health facility. Various international conventions that Pakistan's party to require similar obligation. And yet, Pakistan has a shameful history of hanging the mentally and physically challenged. Khizar Hayat, also schizophrenic, has spent some 17 years on death row, and since 2008, his mental state declined considerably. Although relentless civil society efforts have delayed his execution to allow for a proper medical evaluation, the government remains determined to hang him. A 43-year-old paraplegic, Abdul Basit, also faces the gallows. Basit was convicted and sentenced to death for murder in 2009. In 2010, he contracted tubercular meningitis in prison. Prison authorities did not provide him with adequate health care, so he became paralyzed from the waist down. Despite a government-appointed medical board having confirmed the continuing severity of his condition, a black warrant was issued last month for his execution. The Asian Human Rights Commission has called for the UN to make Pakistan's Human Rights Council membership conditional on halting the execution of all those not related to terrorism and on death row since 1990. In Sri Lanka, 30-year-old Kaviratne Raviraj was pronounced dead sometime after being taken to Pussellawa police station. According to Raviraj's family, he was assaulted by police officers at the time of arrest as well as inside the police station. Large crowds protested on learning of this death, resulting in one sub-inspector and one constable being suspended. While the police claim Raviraj hung himself with his own t-shirt, the Asian Human Rights Commission calls for a comprehensive forensic examination of his body. Such an examination by an independent judicial medical officer will clearly establish the cause of death. The officer in charge of the police station and all senior officers, including the Assistant Superintendent of Police, should also be removed from their posts immediately. Past experiences demonstrate that such ASPs often try to interfere with proper inquiries to exonerate the guilty police officers. Sri Lanka's senior police officers have been making many statements recently about being engaged in ensuring a change in the country's policing pattern. The National Police Commission has even put forward a code of conduct for the police. According to the AHRC, all such public declarations can be tested on an occasion like the alleged hanging of a man inside a police station. Will a cover-up story be repeated again, or will a people witness a credible inquiry into Raviraj's death? Next, a Thai court has handed a 3-year suspended jail term to Andy Hall, a well-known British migrant labor rights defender, for defaming canned fruit company Natural Fruit. Natural Fruit accused Hall of defaming the company after interviews he conducted with Burmese migrants were used in the Finwatch report, Cheap Has a High Price. The 2013 report outlined particularly poor labor conditions in Natural Fruit's factories, which sell pineapple concentrate to Finnish supermarkets. In the report, Hall stated that the migrant workers had their passports confiscated by Natural Fruit Company Limited. They were paid below the minimum wage and not paid when working overtime. In addition, the company also hired children below 15 to work in the factory. On September 20th, Bangkok's Southern Criminal Court ruled that Hall was guilty and sentenced him to 4 years imprisonment with a 200,000 baht fine. However, as he was cooperative during the trial, active in human rights advocacy, and has never been in prison before, the court reduced the jail term and fine to 3 years imprisonment with a 150,000 baht fine. The jail term was suspended for 2 years. Just Asia interviews Ms. Nadthasiri Bergman, one of Andy Hall's legal representatives.
The judgment of Andy Hall case yesterday is shocking to the defense team. I believe it's also giving the chilling effect for all the activists working to improve the situation of human rights in Thailand. In our defense, we're trying to argue that the information Andy received from interviewing those 12 workers are true, and we also provide the court with the document from the authorities who's also going in and check in the factory that there was a human rights violation happening. And the reason we're trying to prove it to be true is because if the violation is really happening and is true, then it is not defamation, and he should not be finding guilty on that charge. However, the judge in his analyze said that the violation within the factory is of minor nature and is already fixed, and therefore is not the human rights violation that is constitute the human trafficking, and he do not believe that the factory was violating the rights of the worker, regardless of all the workers who've been working in that factory. And we also asked them to give testimony in court, which giving clear and solid testimony saying it was the human rights violation happening in the factory for a long time, and that was not taken in the account and is not appear within the judgment.
Nepal is celebrating 1 year since the promulgation of the 2015 Constitution. September 20th has been declared a national holiday. While various communities in hilly areas have celebrated with much fanfare, rallies, and lights, 51% of Nepal's Terai residents observe the day as a black day in Nepal's history. The country's Madheshi population protested all day on September 19th at the Terai district headquarters and turned off lights at homes as a blackout. Around 75% of Nepal's population, including Madheshi, Janajatis, Muslims, and Tharus, have been fighting over the past 15 months for the constitution to address their demands. During the constitution protests from August 2015 to February 2016, around 50 protesters and 11 security officers were killed. Protesters were shot above their chests and heads, a clear infringement of the international rules and regulations which provisions shooting below knees upon extreme necessities. While the Nepalese government has started investigation and arrests for the police officers killed, families of killed protesters are still waiting for compensation and expenses incurred during treatments. In order to contain the situation in Nepal's Terai and address disgruntled voices, the government must start the process of amending the constitution and meeting the people's demands at the earliest. Moving to Indonesia, the country's Human Rights Court has failed to provide justice for victims and family of victims. Since it was established in 2000 to try gross violation of human rights, none of the perpetrators have been convicted or jailed. Indonesia has so far tried 3 cases of gross human rights violations: the Tanjung Priok massacre of 2003, the Abepura Papua incident of 2005, and the East Timor violence of 1999. In all 3 cases, all of the perpetrators, mostly military personnel and police officers, were acquitted by the court due to a lack of evidence. Over the past year, Indonesian civil society has been working on revising the law on the Human Rights Court and strengthening the role of the National Commission on Human Rights. One of the serious problems faced at present is that most of the perpetrators refuse to attend the examination process conducted by the National Commission on Human Rights. Furthermore, the prosecution is keen to raise the name of any high-ranking military personnel and police officers as perpetrators. The lack of political support from the government and parliament is another key problem faced by the Human Rights Court. In the trial of the Tanjung Priok massacre, the perpetrators easily intimidated and bribed the victims to change their testimony. 90% of the victims and witnesses who had earlier testified before the public prosecutor and the National Human Rights Commission thus suddenly changed their testimony and said there was no brutal attack and no shooting conducted by the police and military. A similar situation occurred in the trial of the Abepura Papua and East Timor.
Based on experience on the 3 cases of gross violation of human rights, for instance, like the Tanjung Priok case, the Attorney General delayed or erased high-ranking military officer who strongly involved or committed gross violation of human rights in the Tanjung Priok case. And also in the Abepura case, Abepura Papua, the Attorney General also erased or delayed the high-ranking police officer who involved or committed gross violation of human rights in the Abepura case. Therefore, we need serious commitment from the government. The President must provide political support to the National Commission on Human Rights. And also, the President should evaluate immediately the Attorney General, because the Attorney General has key important role. The Attorney General representing victims of the human rights violation in the court. So if the Attorney General doesn't have enough knowledge or doesn't have enough commitment to charge or brought the victims, or the perpetrators to the Human Rights Court, then the court will fail, like the Tanjung Priok case, Abepura case, and also East Timor case. So actually it is time for the President and the Parliament to reform the court, the Human Rights Court, and also to amend the law on Human Rights Court in order to bring the justice closer to the victims. Without reforming the court, without reforming the judiciary system, especially in the Human Rights Court, so we will face similar experience in the future. Many gross violation of human rights will be, bring to the court and then finally will fail and will not bring any result to the victims.
Finally, the Urgent Appeals Weekly features 3 cases from Nepal and Indonesia. In Nepal, police officers of the District Police Office Siraham illegally arrested and tortured Ramchandra Mahato. He was charged with a robbery in the village of the Inspector General of Police. The victim had to receive treatment for 10 days after losing consciousness due to police torture. Also in Nepal, police officers attached to District Police Office Marang illegally arrested and tortured 2 minors and a youth. The victims' families, their lawyers, and human rights defenders are not being allowed to meet them. In Indonesia, environmental activist Mr. I. Wayan Swardana has been reported to the police for his rejection of the Benoa Bay reclamation plan in Bali. Activists claim that the reclamation will cause serious environmental damage. That is all for this episode of Just Asia. For more on these and other issues, please visit www.humanrights.asia or www.alrc.asia/Just Asia. Thank you for watching and see you next week.